think it's time to start, apparently. So, hi. We're in easy ways to make your site more accessible. This is a beginner's class session here, so if you have any complex accessibility questions, I may or may not be able to answer them, but I'm here to help. I'm cehfisher and work at Media Current. There's a little bit about me, a little blurb that we have to put up there. You can find me on Twitter as well. So we have a lot to cover. I have a lot of slides, so we're just going to go through it as fast as we can. And hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end to discuss. So first, let's just start with some facts about website accessibility. What is website accessibility anyway? Here's our fun little Wikipedia information here. It's website accessibility refers to the inclusive practice of removing barriers that prevent interaction with or access to websites by people with disabilities. When sites are correctly designed, developed, and edited, all users have equal access to information and functionality. So essentially, just make your site as accessible as possible is the takeaway there. So who is website accessibility for? So you look at these people, and they're perfect, and they're perfect teeth, and you may think that none of them have a disability. But it's important to remember that disabilities aren't just visual things. There's a lot of people. Just because a disability is not visually obvious doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So website accessibility is for basically everyone. So you have the usual things that you may think about, visual, hearing impairments, but also things like cognitive, mobility, temporary disabilities, people with seizures, people who are older, sometimes have poor eyesight, poor hearing. There's a lot of people. 57 million Americans, so over 18%, have some type of disability. So website accessibility is for everyone and benefits everyone, is the takeaway there. So why should I care about website accessibility? This might sound like a bunch of hippy-dippy baloney, and if you get that reference, props to you. But there's a lot of reasons to care about website accessibility, including karma points. Everyone should have full access to cat videos and ridiculous internet memes, as well as all the useful information. It's also the smart thing to do. It opens your site to a wider audience. It's good for SEO, search engine, Google rankings, etc. And it's the law, an asterisk there, because it technically is only the law for certain agencies, federal and state, some airlines. But the hope is in 2018 that there'll be harsher laws for all the rest of us, so we can get accessibility out there for everyone. So today we're going to talk about the path to accessibility, and these are my guidelines. These are kind of the things that I think about when I think about accessibility. Other people might have other guidelines or rules or ideas about it, but these are kind of just some things that I keep in the back of my mind when I first started learning about accessibility. So what can I do about it? Rule number 1, let's see if it goes there. Don't freak out. There's a lot of information about website accessibility, and no one expects you to know everything about everything, and it's okay to say you don't know something. Which brings me to my next rule here. Learn a few things. Read an article, watch a video, attend a webinar, chat with someone on Twitter. If you focus on one aspect of accessibility at a time, it won't be as overwhelming, and you'll be able to retain the information a little bit better. Rule number 3, build from the ground up. So if you have the opportunity to build accessibility into your project from the very beginning, do so. It's more difficult and more timely and thus more expensive if you retroactively go back and add it to your site. And that's where I think that one of the myths comes in, that accessibility is expensive. It's not if you do it from the beginning. Rule number 4, use the right tools. So there's a lot of accessibility tools out there that wonderful people have created, and they've spent a lot of time on them, so use them. So tools that you can use during the build process, or tools that you can use after the build process to check for accessibility as well. Like using Wave to evaluate the accessibility of errors and that sort of thing. And of course, I'm cehfisher, so of course I have to have a Star Wars reference in there. Yoda's my favorite. So do or do not, there is no try. And this is one of the times that I disagree with Yoda, which it doesn't ever happen. But for accessibility purposes, try again. So adding 1 or 2 accessible items maybe on your next build, the next time maybe you add 3 or 4. Just it's a little piece of getting it into your system and getting it as part of your repertoire and part of your build process. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say, neither are the accessible websites. So that was kind of like a really quick introduction about what website accessibility is and maybe some things to think about. So now we'll get to the easy part. So there are some easy things that you can do to incorporate accessibility into your websites. I say easy in quotes because collectively all these tasks seem a little bit difficult or maybe a little bit overwhelming, but really each task on its own is not difficult, not hard to do. So we're just talking about this. So the background for the next few slides is the gray muzzle case study. So back in 2015, last year, in the fall, gray muzzle, Media Current in conjunction with Black Mesh, we were in the Open Air Nobility Challenge. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but it's an opportunity to build websites that are accessible from the ground up. And so we accepted the challenge and we used Drupal as our foundation, being a Drupal company. As a team, we chose to redo the Gray Muzzle website. It's an organization that improves the lives of at-risk senior dogs by providing funding and resources to animal shelters, organizations, sanctuaries, and other nonprofit groups nationwide. And then in this picture is my dog. He's an old dog as well, so it's kind of near and dear. Here's the website. You want to visit it. Before we even began the challenge, our fearless leader, Mickey, she gave us a lot of resources and guidelines. And so the following are kind of some of those things that we were thinking about during the build process. First are considerations for structure. So when we were looking at their old site, I should have had a slide for their old site, but didn't like that. We're thinking about structure. We think about things like people who are using screen readers, maybe people who are blind, low vision, etc. Also, readers with reading disabilities and learning disabilities and attention deficit disorders, they sometimes have issues if the page is just scrambled and doesn't have a lot of structure to it. Search engine robots also really like structure, so that's something we consider. And just great general user experience. So for us, for our easy wins that we're going to talk about today are, it's really easy to plan out the heading and page structure ahead of time and make sure it makes sense to readers. Maybe get another set of eyes to look at it. Adding page titles and browser tabs and skipped content links are good for screen readers as well. The heading hierarchy is meaningful and try not to skip heading levels, so it kind of goes together. So you're going to have like an H1 and an H2 and an H3. You're not going to have an H1 and an H4 and an H2. You don't want to jump around if you can avoid it. You want it to make sense. And of course, use tools. At the end of the day, you think your markup is perfect, you use Wave, and then you realize that it's not quite so perfect. So always get the tools out there. All right. Okay, so color and contrast. This is another one. People who are colorblind or have low vision. Monochrome displays. And then one that I hadn't thought about before was CSS and JavaScript disabled browsers. A lot of people do that on their browsers as well. Or just users who are viewing the site in bad lighting conditions. Maybe there's glare or something like that. So you want to make sure that the colors have enough contrast and enough kick to them that they can see them. So in this case, our easy ones are using colors on the opposite ends of the color spectrum and avoiding combinations such as red, green, blue, yellow, the ones that are like really bad for colorblind people. And there's a lot of tools, again, out there that can help you figure out what those are. Also, light shades. Light shades are really bad for contrast purposes. People with low vision have problems sometimes with light shades. Another important thing to do is not to rely on color alone to convey info to your user. So if you had a link, for instance, that didn't have an underline or an italics or something another indicator, a person with who's colorblind may not know that that's even a link. And similarly, don't use solid color backgrounds, especially ones that you're going to use your text on. They're hard to read if you've got a fuzzy background and you also have some text and you have low vision. And there's tons of standard testing tools, the WCAGs. Just a quick information for the WCAGs. They're levels that are basically measuring the contrast ratios between the colors. So 4.5 to 1 is chosen for the AA, and 7 to 1 is the level AAA. And then most sites just need the AA if they need anything at all, but a lot of government agencies do need the AAA. So there are tools out there, but they're kind of fun too. Let's see. All right. So another consideration when you're redesigning a site and thinking about accessibility are fonts. People with reading disorders, learning disabilities, again, like dyslexia, ADHD, and people with low vision. You want to make sure there's a font that they can read. Some easy wins for these fonts are making sure that we have a limited number of fonts and providing alternate fonts as well. So in the case, we'll see in a few minutes, but in the case of the Gray Muzzle, we had alternate fonts that were specific to people like with dyslexia and also high contrast themes to help them. I don't want to spoil all the surprises of the next slide, but yeah. So another consideration for fonts are specifying the font size in terms of percentages, M's, or relative values. And that way, if you do have a person with low vision and they're going to use a tool to make their fonts bigger or smaller, then they can easily do that without it being too pixelated. And of course, use adequate font size, 10-point minimum. I would say like 14 px, I mean, is kind of nice, but that might be a little bit too big for everyone. But limit the use of all caps. All caps are sometimes read by screen readers. It's misunderstood by screen readers, or it could be construed as yelling, so you don't really want to yell to your users. And the use of font variants, that's things like bolds and italics and anything that makes the font a little bit special. So you don't want it to be, a crazy mix of all kinds of things going on there. Fonts and italics and bolds and So here, considerations for links, also people with screen readers, people who choose not to use a mouse or cannot use a mouse. So they're going to be tabbing through your sections. You want them to be able to get to your information, your links faster, easier. And search engine robots love it when your links are, obvious, and the markup's good for that. So some of the things that you want to do here for the links, differentiate the links from the elements besides color. We kind of talked about that already. Use descriptive link text. So you want to say something, instead of saying like click here, you want to say for more information on whatever, click here, or something a little bit nicer than that. That's kind of a long link, because I said later on I'll say do not use super short or super long links as well. Do not use images for links. The one where it says design link focus indicators, that's the thing with the tabbing, and you want to make sure that it's obvious. Unfortunately, a lot of base themes I've seen in Drupal and otherwise will turn that feature off completely. The focus indicator is 0. And so you want to make sure that you test this. And it's really easy. All you have to do is press tab, and you'll know right away if you've got a good focus indicator or not. And then make sure your link makes sense on its own, no click here's or ambiguous text. Okay, so media. Again, considerations are people with visual disabilities, people who have auditory disabilities as well. We haven't talked about that too much. Again, CSS or JS disabled. And devices with small displays, so phones and tablets. And that's one of the things that I think that you can really, like a selling point for accessibility is that not only is it great for search and optimization and bots and that sort of thing, but it's also really good for mobile. Because if you're focusing on the mobile site and the accessibility of it on the desktop, in theory, it'll transfer over to the mobile and tablet. So here are easy ones for media. Use your animation, video, and audio carefully and selectively. So don't have a page where you have 10 different visual elements going on. That's a little bit too much for everybody. Avoid flashing and strobing content that can cause seizures. That's not a good thing. Provide alternate ways to access content. So if you're doing something like a video, maybe you have a transcript of it. I mean, it's going to take you maybe like 10 more minutes to do this. It's not really that much time. And the big one for media is alt tags. You want to be accurate, conveying the information or function represented by the image. You want to be synced, so you don't want to burden the screen reader with lots of text to read, because it's going to be saying these words out loud. So if you say, this is a picture of a beautiful old dog rolling and frolicking in the meadow, or something, your reader who's using a screen, or your user with a screen reader might kind of get annoyed with you. And again, avoiding things like images of, graphic of, movie of. The screen readers are already telling them that, so they don't need that extra information. And then the last one, which I learned just recently, is if you leave your, like let's say you have an image and it's just decorative. It doesn't convey any information. Screen readers don't need to look at it and pick it up. You can leave your alt attribute empty, and it just skips right over it. It doesn't even recognize it as an image. So it's kind of nice for hiding things too. So here, we're going to touch on some of the special features that we did for the Gray Muzzle site. Unfortunately, Drupal doesn't have like the best accessible menu options out there as modules. So we took one and modified it a bit. ARIA labels, and we added some different things there. As we talked about a little bit earlier, we have a dyslexia font. So people with dyslexia sometimes will invert different letters and numbers. So like a P looks like a Q, and in certain fonts, like even like here, you can see the P, if you can easily flip it and it looks like a Q like on that word sitemap there. But if you have a special font, like we use the Open Dyslexia font, it's on GitHub. And so they have it, it's created in such a way that you can't flip it, or it's harder to flip. High contrast theme, it's very, it's like against my front-end developer sensibilities, because it's very ugly. It's black and yellow. I mean, that's all it really is. But it's really great for someone who has that kind of disability where they really just want to see the text. And again, you can hide things in that theme based on, if it's purely just a decorative thing, you can just hide it. The font resizing buttons, there are a lot of browsers and tools that already have that built in. But the reason why we used ours is to avoid some of those horizontal scrolls and vertical scrolls that you get when you, control plus, control minus, that sort of thing. Sitemap's really good, again, for bots, but it's also good for people who maybe want to take a better look at your structure and understand where they want to go. And last but not least, of course, is an accessibility statement and a way for someone to get a hold of you if it's some issues with your site. This just lets people know these are the things that we've looked at, these are the things that we've considered. If you need any more information, sometimes there's commands. All right, so now it's time for your challenge. Your challenge is to, next time you design or build a site, to take one or two of these things from the list, maybe one from each category, maybe just like one overall, and add it into your repertoire. It's like any new skill, incorporating it is going to take some time. It may be a little bit of time to think about heading structure, or maybe checking your colors if you're designing, but it'll add up and eventually it'll just become a part of your process. I'll do this one real quick. So these are just some resources. I'm not going to go through all these, but this is one of those things for after the fact. You can look back through the slides, you can go on the links. Lots of information. These are just kind of places to get you started with. Some general resources, checklists, and then tools. I really like Color Safe. It's a lot of fun. It can tell you the WCAG levels as well. Wave is great. It will go through your whole site and tell you all the things that are wrong with it. It's great. So that's about it. There's my wrap up here. Wait, of course I have to have another Star Wars. So sprints are tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but Sunday, March 20th, across the street. And some feedback. And that's it. So hopefully you guys have all kinds of questions, right? All right, go ahead.
So you mentioned that the core menu system is not providing you the ARIA properties to
Yeah.
so that you rely on it. What can be done what's the work that you've done to improve the menu system back to the project?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, there's some that actually do have some of that involved, but there's a lot of different levels of ARIA, different kinds of things that it can add, and so we added more. So it's not that they don't have any, but we just wanted more, like more labels and that sort of thing. So I think what we could do is probably contribute back, make some of those changes, and see if we can add it into a contrib module. But yeah, we were kind of disappointed that there weren't more, that were 100% accessible. There's some that were close, but yeah.
Follow-up?
Oh,
Are you
sure.
expecting that to be like a configurable thing, or are you expecting that to be just something that a coder would take over?
Well, yeah, I mean, we did a lot of work on it in-house, so I think that we could just take it and just put it out there as a contrib module and then bring it back to the community. I don't know if that's a plan, but if it's not, I will encourage them to do that. Sounds great.
What do you guys do as part of your workflow to sort of have a checklist we can go over as you're planning, but also for projects that are underway or already complete? What would be a good few things to make sure you're hitting on as you try to get it?
Yeah, I mean in the sense of the green muzzle one, or just in general with comments and stuff? Yeah, so we do have a documentation that we get hand over to our clients, and certain clients, it's kind of an add-on feature. Unfortunately, it's not. Some of it's we try to build in as we get there, but we do have a checklist of the things that we are looking for and the things that we plan to build out as part of the thing. So it's sort of half sales and marketing / half dev. This is what we're going to do. So I don't know if that's out there yet, but if it is, I can send that information to you. But for us, we have an internal checklist and what we kind of go with. And we also do a lot of team meetings. And so when we're in the middle of the build process, we have an accessibility expert on staff who can come in and say, okay, yeah, during the process and after the process, she can say, oh, you guys are forgetting this, or why don't you check on this? And so it's kind of a twofold process.
I know that I can Google it, but is there, off the top of your head, like a website that that has like the amount of people that actually have disabilities?
Oh, sure, yeah. And then one slide too at the very beginning, we have the 57 million Americans that have a disability. But there's a lot of different, which is over 18% of the population, which if you think about it is a very large number. And then of that, there's a breakdown of like what is considered severe disability versus maybe like a minor or a smaller disability. But yeah, that's just statistics for America, and I think that stat was like from 2012. So I don't know if there's even more recent than that. But yeah, I think it's based off of census data.
How do you handle non-technical clients using heading tags out of order in WYSIWYG? Besides, drilling into the heads.
Yeah, there's not a lot you can do about clients and content in general, I think, but I think giving them the understanding of why it's important. For clients, unfortunately, the Karma Points one doesn't work as often, but you can say things like SEO, marketing, like all the buzzwords, right? So if your content is indexed right, Google in theory will rank it higher if it's more accessible. So you could say that as well. Say your content needs to be evaluated by this X tool, and then give them access to that tool. And then after that, there's not much you can do about it.
And one more question.
Sure.
You said that limit the use of all caps on sites. Does that apply to just markup on a page, or can you do a text transform on the CSS? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I'm not sure actually. That's a good question, because I just know that screen readers, when they see all caps, they read it as screaming, or not screaming, but as being loud or emphasis, which is the point of all caps. So I imagine that's a good question then. Just tweet me and I'll find out the answer to that.
Thank you.
I don't know if anyone else has any questions.
Is there any screen reader simulator that you could run for free to see what your site would?
Yeah, there's a lot in the resources. There's some tools you can look at. I think I have one on there. Some general ones. think Wave is a good one. That's a big one. But yeah, unfortunately there's good tools and bad tools out there, and the screen reader emulators aren't as good. It's just like when you do, as a front-end developer, you do an emulator of IE8 or something on a PC, and you want to see how it looks. It's going to get you kind of halfway there, but it wouldn't be the same as having like a real, like JAWS or something installed onto your system. Oh, go ahead.
How do screen readers handle things when we're dealing with special character models like font awesome?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question too, because in theory that's a font, so they would read it, but I don't know if it would read like the code. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it'd be like, and that's a good question too. I'm not sure. I'm not as familiar with screen readers as maybe somebody else, but
Sorry, there are
Sure.
certain ARIA tags that will tell screen readers just be like, yeah, don't worry about this. This is
Okay.
decorative element. Same thing with the images.
So as
It's
a-
more explicit. It's like, yeah, just on your way. You know?
sort of like when you hide the images, like
Pretty much.
it's a decorative object or something. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I didn't know that. Thanks.
I just want to throw up a comment that it can be really helpful with those fonts to actually blow your font size up really big, to 48 or 72 point.
Okay.
See what it actually, how does it degrade
Yeah.
at that point? Sometimes you can fix it easily.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know if I mentioned that on the font slide, but there is TrueType, which is a type of font system where it will do that. And same thing with relative values. That in theory will expand it, no matter how big you get or how small you get. It should retain the properties of the actual letters, but
I was actually thinking more in terms of page flow and things
Oh,
like
okay.
that. Sometimes if the font's too big,
Oh, I can
it
see that,
actually
yeah.
becomes invisible,
yeah.
or other series.
Yeah, I know that when we did the Gray Muzzle site, we did a lot of testing like that. We blew up the font as much as we could. And actually, you can put limits on how big people can blow up your font as well, unless they have a special like tool inside their browser. So for us, I think we capped it at like 72 point or something. And that was just for things like that, where things got too big and we didn't want it to be expanded beyond. But yeah, it's a good point. But I should mention too, like, you know, accessibility for me, even though I've been doing it and focusing on it for the past year or so, like I'm still learning more and more as I go. And so I feel like even for me, it's an ongoing process. And I always learn something new like today. And I think that's great. I think that that's whole part of it is being open to, you know, taking the step to care and actually, you know, working it into your system. So.
When you were talking about the high contrast theme, were you saying that would be your main content of the site, or that there's
No,
a way
so-
to access an alternate theme?
Yeah, so if you go to graymuzzle.org, you can see it, but it's that third box down where it's we have an accessibility toolbar on the top. The first option was dyslexia, the second one was contrast, and you can actually have them both on at the same time, which is very beautiful. And then you have your text resize. And so it's just an optional theme for someone who needs a little bit more help with contrast. And so it allows them to have that access to the content. Yeah, go to, here, I'll go back to that, graymuzzle.org in case you guys want to. Here you go. Any other questions? Sure.
What's the ideal contrast for text on white, black and white?
Yeah, so then you can test it, well, I guess ideal contrast of black and white, that is like the ultimate contrast, right?
If there's anything wrong with somebody told me recently that was incorrect, that you shouldn't do totally black and white, that was too much of a contrast.
I haven't heard that. I don't think there is such thing as too much of a contrast. I think it's a style thing. I know that a lot of people do like a softer gray color with white. That's just kind of a style preference. I don't think it has anything to do with, it might just be too stark for some people maybe. But yeah, I think that would be the ultimate, you know, WGAC, like it would be AAA for sure.
I've never understood why people do gray text on a light gray background.
That's not enough contrast. Yeah, I know. And I think part of it is that people don't really think about it. They don't understand that that might be difficult for someone to read. So that's part of it. Yeah. But yeah, that's why we're here, right? We're all aware now. Now we can all go out there and pick a rule and implement it. Yeah.
How did you get into this subject in the first place?
Well, for me personally, front-end developer, and I've been a front-end developer for a while, and I was able to do I've always known a little bit about accessibility, but not enough where I felt like I was comfortable. until we did the challenge, and I was asked to be part of the front-end development team. Yeah, and then I just keep doing it. So yeah. Anything else? You guys are good. Thanks for all the questions.